Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Tom from UDS with another edition of the Quarantine Sessions, where I chat to people a lot cooler than myself in the wonderful land of lockdown. Now, my guest this week is a musician whose most recent project, entitled Anxiety Cat, has a simple mission: to make sense of the surreal, terrifying unreality we now all co-inhabit. Easy, right? It is my pleasure to introduce a songwriter, visionary, and philosopher, Rob Taxpayer.
Transmission. Signing off, Mr. and Mrs. America. Good night, Libya. Good night, Russia. Good night to the Brazilian mines, and to the China pride, and to every ship at sea. It was a good run. Tom, this is awesome. I'm really glad to be having this chat with you.
The pleasure is all mine. How are you doing during these strange times that we live in?
Jesus Christ. It's insane. It's insane. I was just telling you, I'm in New Orleans, Louisiana, which folks at least in the United States and maybe internationally know it's an incredibly dysfunctional city on a good day. And, but also a wonderful city. You know, it's the birthplace of jazz. It's the birthplace of all kinds of fantastic things. But, you know, it's a pretty dysfunctional place typically, and it's even more so now. But with the recent protests that have just taken over the United States, it's been remarkably not as violent here as it has been in some other places. You know, so far, our police have shown restraint, which really, in my opinion, I think it's up to the police whether or not any violence occurs. You know, in
100%.
any of the other places where there's been violence, it's typically been at the hands of the police. And so our police have been good so far. You know, knock on wood. I hope it continues and the protests here continue. And yeah, so I'm hanging in there, man. I'm just trying to get by. The pandemic, we got hit pretty hard. We had a pretty high infection and death rate, and you know, we're still technically in quarantine, but we've started reopening. We're in what they call phase 1 of reopening in Louisiana, where I live. And so, you know, I've had a lot of time to play music and do things like this.
Absolutely.
And spend some time chatting with folks and catching up with old friends. And yeah, so I can't complain. How are you?
I'm very well. Obviously, with the world sort of falling apart, it's, as you say, it's important to sort of ground yourself in these things that you can control and the things that really do add value to your life. So it sounds like we're both the best that we can be at the moment.
Yeah.
But for the unfortunate few who may not have heard of you and the project before, in your own words, could you just quickly introduce yourself and Anxiety Cat?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name's Rob. I'm a musician. I'm a teacher. I teach the free GED classes at a local community college. My friends call me Rickety Rob. I like to build things that are poorly built. And as far as music goes, I've been in the DIY punk world for a good while. The band that most people would have heard of is called the Taxpayers, that I've been involved with. They started in 2007. Started a little bit before that. But started making records in around 2007 and touring. And Taxpayers put out, you know, about, quite a few records. And then since then, I've had a few country projects, few, personal solo projects and things like that. And then this new one, Anxiety Cat, this is the first one that's just been, it's just been my own stuff, just my stuff. And yeah, outside of that, I like playing the piano. I like learning new things, and just
very cool.
Nice to be able to chat with you about it.
I really do appreciate it, but obviously,
I don't really know how to. Tom, how do you introduce yourself? I never know what to do. Like, what do I say?
well, I have one way that I like to do it, and it's interesting how people interpret it, but it's a question that I often ask people just to get to know him a bit better. If you could be a type of sandwich, what type of sandwich would you be?
Oh, I like this one. What kind of sandwich would I be? So I played a show last summer in Denver, Colorado, that was part of a festival called Compost Heap Fest. And it was kind of a, I guess you would call it like maybe a politically minded, like folk punk fest, I guess maybe is what the best term for it would be. And I met a band that was called Bird Teeth. And I believe they're from Seattle, Washington. And they have a thing where they ask this exact question. They ask people like, what is your favorite sandwich? And what is a sandwich, right? And so what can a sandwich be? And so, some people say, well, like my favorite sandwich is a quesadilla. And people will argue, maybe they'll say, that's not a sandwich. That's just some fried cheese and some fried dough. And Bird Teeth's take on it is they think that everything is a sandwich. A sandwich is whatever you make it. Sandwich
Absolutely.
Can be whatever you make it. So anyway, my favorite sandwich is a grilled cheese that is dipped in A1 sauce, which is kind of like
Sort of like rich barbecue sauce.
Yeah, well, it's like tangy. It usually goes on things like steak, and it's a really rich, kind of vinegary kind of taste to it. And if you make a grilled cheese and you dip it in A1 sauce, it's got this savory element that you've never tasted a grilled cheese having before. It's remarkable. I'm always going to go with that. That's my sandwich.
Absolutely.
What about you?
That's a tough one. I'm a big fan of a Reuben. I love a Reuben.
Yeah.
Salt beef, mustard, and pickles. Gorgeous sandwich.
I'm with you.
But anyway,
I like a Reuben too.
I love it. Also, my favorite band is called Reuben, so it's all kind of serendipitous. So there you go. But anyway, you say Anxiety Cat is a solo project, but it's not really a solo project. So I have to ask your co-collaborator, how is Pip?
Yeah, Pip. In fact, I feel terrible that I called it that. It's really not. You're right. It really isn't. Like it's very much the entire project is as a result of him. And Pip is my cat. He's one of my cats. In fact, I don't know where he's at right now. I should probably go find him. He's probably sleeping because it's daytime here. It's the afternoon, which is when he sleeps. But so Pip is. So I don't think I've ever met a more anxious cat in my life. He's very vocal, and he's very he's scared of everything, but he's also he's confused by everything. But he's also incredibly brave at the same time. Like, he wants to get to know everyone and everything, wants to be friends with everything, but he's just filled with anxiety, and you can tell because of how he sounds. Oh, hold it. I hear him right now. He's outside the door. He's going, ow. Let's see if we can go find him. Anyway, so he's just an anxious dude. And we eventually, like, I met him when he was maybe a teenager, and he was my partner's cat. And she had gotten him, I think from I forget what the story was, a shelter or something like that, him and his sister. And we could never figure out quite why he was always so freaked out about everything. We're like, man, we pet you all the time. We feed you. You got a pretty good life. What are you so upset about? And then I started to realize, he's freaked out by everything. He's freaked out by the state of the world constantly, and just every little thing that's going on around, he's hyper aware of. And so eventually we started to understand each other, and as we understood each other more, our relationship kind of grew and became more complex. And he's like one of my best friends now, because I get him and he gets me. Not always. I don't always get him, but so anyway, when I was making all these very anxiety riddled songs, I started working on all these songs. He would always freak out just outside the door. If he can't be near me when I'm working on songs, he usually kind of has a meltdown. So usually let him in. And if it's quiet songs, sometimes I have to kick him out because he's not very quiet. So he would always be there at my feet, just kind of being anxious as I would work on songs. And then, And then one day I looked at Pip and I said, "Hey man, do you want to be in this band with me?" And he was like, "No." But I told him to join anyway. So here we are. I can't find him. He's sleeping right now. I don't know where he's at, actually.
That's okay. But, that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll put a picture up on the screen sometime now so that he's with us in spirit for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But anyway, your album, The End of Reality as We Know It, is unlike anything I've heard before, both musically in terms of the way it tackles a broad range of themes. Was there a defining watershed moment where you decided that this album needed to be made?
Yeah, I suppose so. How I do things, I just kind of muck along. I just do what I do, and sometimes there's some forethought, but usually like the meaning behind something just kind of takes form as I'm working on it, and then it starts making sense as to what it is. That was kind of the case with this. But really, the election of Donald Trump happened, and the election of Donald Trump happened here in the United States, and I was. I remember where I was at. I was talking to my friend Benny on the phone, and she was in Chicago, and I was going to pick up my partner, she's a classical musician. She's a cellist, and she was at a rehearsal or something like that. I was going to pick her up. I was talking to Benny on the phone, and we all thought it was, the way that the media had been making it out. We were like, all right, this con man, fascist, whatever this dude is, there's no way. This America is a bad place full of bad history, but there's no way we're that bad. There's no way we'll elect this guy. And I was talking to Benny on the phone, and we were kind of ignoring the results. We went out and voted, we did our thing. And then honestly, we didn't watch the election results as closely as we typically do, because pretty much everyone expected it to be a landslide in the opposite direction. And then Benny was like, "Hey, Rob, Donald Trump is winning right now, and most of the vote is counted." And I was like, "What? Where are you from? She was like, turn on NPR right now." And I did, and I was like, "I think I gotta go." It's just like, "Yeah, I know you do." And it was, my jaw dropped. I had no idea. I had no idea that would happen. And so, a lot of people were floored by it. Some people weren't floored by it. I talked to some people, a lot of people who are minorities who have been disenfranchised their whole life. They're like, "We fucking saw that coming. That's America." Yeah. But for a large portion of the country, and really a large portion of the world, nobody saw that coming. And so there was some fallout from it. We were all just kind of trying to pick up the pieces and figure out what this meant. What does this mean? What does this mean about our country, that 40% of the country thinks this is a good idea? And so from there, it kind of began snowballing, right? And things never made sense in quote unquote reality for me. Reality is subjective to begin with. Everyone's reality is different, but there definitely seemed to be an acceleration of the subjectivity of reality. Up until 2016, you could still count to a degree on the idea that facts were facts and there was something to truth. You could make sense of truth by basically finding out what the facts were, and then whatever the facts added to, that was the truth, right? And it started to become clear that was not the case, that pretty much the truth could be sold to the highest bidder, or to the person who had the most bots on Twitter, or to the person with the most power. And so then all just different corners of reality started shifting in that way. And I think really what happened was the powerful and the wealthy started figuring out how to manipulate reality through the use of some of these new tools that, is in some ways it started being pioneered by Russia, right? With a lot of the interference that they started doing in other elections, because their main power was not, at least internationally, was not militarily, because, at the end of the day, they don't have, they've got a big military, but they don't have the biggest military. They're not going to go and, bomb the United States if there's a disagreement over anything. But what they can do is they can kind of subtly interfere with Twitter and things like that. So, so anyway, I started working on songs about like, where did all this come from? How do you trace this back to its birth? And I tried to do that. And obviously I wrote a bunch of songs about it, more than what the Anxiety Cat thing had to say about it, because there's a lot of places you can trace it to. But at the end of the day, I had to decide, to kind of concentrate on a couple of things that seemed to me that were the big moments from the past maybe 10, 15 years that led to it. And so that's kind of how the project was born. And there's a few other elements to it. Like I wanted to explore digital music a little bit for the first time ever, and start utilizing like audio excerpts from international figures, from like powerful international figures or UN reports and so forth, and try to make songs out of that. So basically it was a kind of an experiment to try to make songs in a different way.
Absolutely.
Does that answer your question? I don't know.
It certainly does. And I mean, for me personally, just as the listener, it's not punk in sort of the traditional sense, but it's one of the most, in terms of spirit, punk albums that I've heard in as long as I can remember, in the way that it sort of really tackles the issues of sort of geopolitical issues of the world, but in a way that I've just never seen done before. And I think that fresh take on it adds to the sort of the sense of punk rock, even if it isn't traditional punk rock. I'm the one rambling now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it pleases me to hear you say that it's a punk thing, because that's my background for sure. That's where I come from. But you're right. It's definitely not what is typical of that world. But I do think, yeah, like you say, thematically, it's, in some ways, the most punk record I've ever made. And I've made a lot of records over the years. And a lot of them were from like overtly punk bands that called themselves punk bands. I wouldn't say that Anxiety Cat is necessarily a punk band.
No.
Maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it, to be honest with you. But, punk at its best, I think, is a challenge to both the preconceived notions of the listener and also a challenge to the structural, just the structural elements of the society around the band that's making the record. It tends to, at its best, be just a reflection of the power structure and
Absolutely.
A reflection of all the negative aspects of the power structure. And so, I hope that's the case with it. Thanks for saying that.
100%. I speak no lie. Unlike a lot of the media. Anyway, obviously you did a lot of research into a lot of issues from around the world. Did you find anything that truly shocked you? There's something that you either weren't aware of, or was a lot more of an issue than that you first perhaps conceived of if that makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first off, so many things. The biggest one in this case was Muammar Gaddafi. I actually started making a song about the overthrow of Gaddafi before I really understood the nature of the overthrow of Gaddafi. And that's to my great shame that I had not done the research on it beforehand. But, I'm pleased to say that I learned a lot. And I think that, the song changed and morphed as a result of it. But I started working a song about it because in my mind, Muammar Gaddafi, if there's anyone who sees this who's not heard of him, I assume they have, but he was the leader of Libya from 1969 to 2011. And in 1969 to 2011, first off, that's a long fucking time. And by the way, maybe I shouldn't swear, huh?
That's fine.
Does it matter on this? Is it okay?
Whatever you want. Whatever you want.
It just kind of slipped out. But anyway, a long time, 1969 to 2011, right? And how he had been sold to me in the media that I consumed, which I always thought that the media I consumed was non-biased. We all think that, right? Even when it's not the case. But
yeah,
here I am. I'm listening to National Public Radio, and I'm listening to stuff like Democracy Now, and I'm trying to read more like non-biased, corporate media. But even within those non-corporate media entities, the way that they sold Gaddafi was that here's a dictator. This guy's a dictator, and he's been in charge of the country for a long time. He's done terrible things to his people. His people are starving, and they're ready for change, right? So when 2011 hit and the revolution started in Libya, it was, in some ways, it was an extension of the Arab Spring that was happening in other countries in that region of the world. I'm listening to it on the radio, and I'm like, yeah, fuck that guy. Good riddance. And the same thing is happening. Like our president at the time is hold on, I'm gonna go plug this phone in. I'm realizing, but our president at the time is Barack Obama, and he is he's a guy who he's purportedly a progressive president, right? Or he was supposed to be a progressive president. And that's the way that he's selling it too. He's saying, well, here's a dictator, and dictators get what's coming to them, right? And so, so he gets overthrown, he gets killed, and brutally killed. And the first clue to me that something was wrong about that narrative was the way in which the media reported on his death. It wasn't on the overthrowing that kind of like clued me into it, but it was on how his death was reported on by almost everything. We're talking the big news, the small news, the independent news, the tabloid news. Everything was selling the same story, which is kind of scary how they sold it. It was a very gleeful celebration of his death, of not just his death, but the way that he died, which he was brutalized and raped, sodomized at least, with knives and like all kinds of crazy stuff. And this was on the front page of places like The Guardian and the New York Times and the Washington Post. And some of the headlines were things like, Gaddafi dies cowering in the sewer like a rat was one of the headlines. And a lot of them resembled that. And I was like, what? That doesn't seem very non-biased, how that's being reported on. Like, first off, we shouldn't, regardless of who this guy was, we shouldn't be celebrating the way that he died. That's not good. And so anyway, so I kind of went back to it, and one of his final speeches that he gives, and one of the reasons for the U.S. intervention in Libya, was this speech that I used for an Anxiety Cat song. And that's what kind of got me into it. Was I started kind of trying to understand the nature of that speech and understanding who he was. And I'm like realizing that all over the internet, in Libyan message boards and Libyan news sources and comment sections everywhere, Libyans really loved this guy. Not everyone, obviously, but way more than I expected. Way more than I expected. And I was like, why? What is he just become a martyr, or is it something more than that? And I think it was something more than that. And the more I learned about his rise to power and kind of his role in international events, started to understand it a little bit more. And I didn't come out thinking that he was a good guy, really. I thought, that he was a more complex guy, and that he had done some actually remarkably good things, not just all bad things. And so, like, for example, his takeover of Libya was bloodless. It was a bloodless coup to take over from a monarchy. So they had a king before, and they took over and they turned over the control supposedly to the people. They wanted to create a direct democracy that was more functional than the United States of America. He took out ads, and like, speaking of the New York Times, there's an ad from the New York Times where he's like advocating for direct democracy. They had some of the best healthcare in North Africa and that region for a long time. They gave free education to all of the people in Libya, including college education. If you wanted to go to college, not just in Libya, if you want to go to college in Oxford in England, or you want to go to Harvard in the United States, you can go for free on the Libyan government's dime. And so they did a lot of really great things. They had, amazing infrastructure and blah, blah, blah. So people were like, yeah, this guy's bombastic and he's kind of crazy and he's kind of paranoid, but like, he's actually done a lot for us. And then there's the bad stuff also, he also had a very just vast police state almost, in which political repression was happening of people that were not on his side. And, so I could go on forever. But anyway, that's the main thing that just opened my mind. And that from there, it just spiraled. And I started finding out other things about the nature of the world and its leaders that they don't really teach in history books, and that they don't really talk about in an explicit way in most media, including the unbiased, quote unquote, progressive media. That it's a more complicated story than you can tell in one headline, and so that was kind of where I ended up with it, I guess.
It's so interesting because even to this day, until sort of I really started listening to Anxiety Cat, the narrative that, as I understood it, was that he was a monster, Gaddafi.
Yeah, me too.
I would have probably been in my late teens when he got killed, but the way they were reporting it, you sort of grouped him in with the sort of the other media villains of the time. So Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden, that is sort of the caliber of man. So to sort of understand that he did have this other side that made him a much more complex character goes to show how dangerous and the power that the media has over a population, and how it does warp reality as we know it. The reality isn't, more so now than ever, is this fluid thing that is different for everyone, and it is really scary. It's really scary. And obviously,
it's a scary time to be alive as a result, because you don't know what to trust. You in some cases you don't even trust what you see with your own eyes, because you begin to wonder what influence has propaganda had on the events at hand. We were just talking about it before we went live about Brexit, right? Like you're like, how many of these are sincerely held beliefs? And how many of them are just manipulated beliefs as a result of online stuff? Like, I think about I got family that lives over in Florida, and I got family in Ohio. I got family in all different parts of this country. And some of them have beliefs that I would never have expected them to have 20 years ago. And I don't think that they're sincerely held beliefs in a lot of cases. I think that some of it has just been manipulation by outside forces over their mindset. And now their reality is warped, and it's like affecting the rest of our realities as well.
Absolutely. So, even with you mentioned Brexit, go back less than 5 years before the election, and before the election, the campaign for the vote for the referendum for Brexit. If you ask the average person where they sit, either in terms of class or political leaning, they wouldn't care. The average person wouldn't care if we were in the EU. They wouldn't have given it a second thought. But then all of a sudden, it became this thing that divided families, that divided a nation by the thinnest of margins, and now it's got repercussions that will go on for generations, probably.
Sure.
And it's insane how over such a short amount of time, it became this non-issue, into the biggest thing in the country. And it's terrifying that it was a small group of people that influenced a population. And and
it split the post-World War II, almost United Nations of Europe that had been created as a result of the destruction of World War II. It destroyed that. And when you start thinking about why that happened, it makes sense, right? It would make sense why certain actors in the international scene would want to see a fractured Europe. And if you start thinking about it like international stability, it starts making a little bit more sense than, everyone in England is now crazy and thinks that stupid things are a good idea. No, they were just like in the United States, 40% of the country could not have thought that Donald Trump was a reasonable person unless they had been manipulated by something.
Absolutely.
Their fears had been manipulated. Their anger had been manipulated. And same thing happened with Brexit.
Absolutely. But as you say, things are definitely not getting better since the album came out, specifically in the last few days. And so with that in mind, with sort of things seeming to be escalating in terms of how fast the world is changing, do you see Anxiety Cat being a ongoing project in response to this sort of transient nature of reality?
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I wanted to make something. I'm going to call it a solo project again. Something with my cat Pip. It was something that did not require getting together with with a band and recording and the studio and that kind of stuff was because then it could be much easier to create something than just put it out there in the world, something that speaks to, moments. And yeah, I mean, last night I was up all night working on an Anxiety Cat song. So, I mean, like it's a good outlet for me to try to make sense of what's going on, at least. So whether there will be other records, probably, who knows? Right now, I mean, really, if the protests over the brutalism of our African-American community in the United States had not taken off, what I'd be doing right now is I guess, maybe promoting this record. I don't have a publicist. I've never done that kind of thing. I've always been in the DIY punk world. So, call people up. Hey, Tom, I got a new record. Or, just call different friends and tell them about it, because that's how I like doing things. I like keeping it small, but that's probably what I would be doing right now. And so that's when you and me first started talking, it was right before this happened. And it was like a day before it happened.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, let's talk on Zoom or Skype or whatever, in a week, and look where we're at a week later. So I've not been promoting it, obviously, because I'm like, there's more important things going on right now. So I'm going to go out to the protests. I'm going to go try to, help out where I can. We, by the way, we have way more additional issues on top of all this that we're dealing with here in New Orleans that, I mean, I could tell you all about. I don't know. Like, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but like, we got a lot of other shit that we're also dealing with. Like our garbage workers are on strike right now, and they've been replaced by slave labor. The prisoners have been forced to pick up our garbage now in the city. And so now we've got unpaid slave labor who's picking up our garbage in the city of New Orleans. They're still on strike, but nobody's seeing it because of the pandemic, right? So like everyone's staying inside, so they're not seeing the garbage workers strike. And all they were striking for was for some fucking masks and some, like, a few dollars of an hour wage increase during the pandemic, right? In addition to that, we had a skyscraper collapse about 6 months ago that they were building downtown. And it was being built by, in some cases, undocumented immigrants who were whistleblowers. And they said, hey, this building's going to fall down because of how it's being built. There's something going on with the permitting office where they're just letting some things slide that they shouldn't. This is going to fall down. And of course it fell down the next day and it killed a bunch of people. And so we have a skyscraper that's just crumbled in the middle of our skyline right now with bodies hanging out of it that they still haven't cleaned up. For like 6 months. And so we got that. We have regular police shootings in the surrounding areas around Louisiana. Like, New Orleans is a pretty progressive city. And so far, our police have been doing an all right job of not antagonizing protesters or making things worse. But the surrounding police departments are still as fucked up as ever. Jefferson Parish is right next door to us, the city of Metairie and Kenner, Louisiana. They just shot a guy right at the same time that these new protests broke out, and that has barely made the news. And they shot an unarmed black man 10 miles from where I live. And there's protests going on about it, but really there's just so much going on in the world that nobody knows where to keep track of things, So yeah, I'm still talking to people about Anxiety Cat, but there's just so much going on. I'm like, I gotta stay involved in that, I guess. And I'll do record stuff. So I worked really hard on it for several years. I want to tell people about this new record, but I don't want to take up valuable airspace too much by doing that,
The album's going to be there forever now. So I absolutely commend the stance you've taken. And I suppose the danger is, from a global point of view, is that you just become, dare I say, numb to it after a while. There's just so much that you have to process on a daily basis that it comes to a point that sort of your basic instincts kick in and you're just like, I can't process all of these atrocities and terrible things, and you feel terrible because you want to consciously, you want to help and you want to get riled up and you want to help out in any way you can, but there's only so much that one person can do, and there's so much that seems to be compounding at the moment that it's not. I mean, it sounds flippant to say it's not good, but that's all I can say. That's all I can say.
Well, you're right. It's and the thing is if we stay so locked in to the 24-hour news cycle of constant outrage, of which there are innumerable outrages happening around the world at any given time, more so right now it seems, but I mean, really, there's always something going on. And if we stay locked into that, I mean, you're going to have a meltdown at some point. And you got to unplug from it from time to time. And you got to, you got to let your brain clear itself out and all of your stress clear itself out. You got to watch some Great British Bake Off. You got to, you got to read a comic book. You got to listen to some jazz and not be on your phone for like a day in order to be able to function in this world. And I think most people have not figured out how to do that. I think we're still so locked in that, I mean, it's going to come out in a lot of crazy ways if we don't find ways to not have these meltdowns that we're all probably having right now. Like, it's not just a case of self-care. It is this case of self-care. You need to do some self-care, but it's also like for the benefit of society. We need to make sure that everybody is not having meltdowns constantly as a result of all of the shit that's going on. So, that's a long way of me saying, like, yeah, I hear you. There's so much going on. I think you just gotta unplug those sometimes. You gotta turn off your phone. You gotta go for a walk. That kind of stuff as much as possible.
100%. I was gonna ask you sort of how do you cope when the world, again, to use sort of a cliche, gets too much, and I absolutely agree. There's sort of having that sort of distance and sort of centering yourself with the more immediate surroundings, whether that be nature or family or just the things that are within your own little domain, is so important, because you can't, as much as everyone should be fighting for these very sort of noble and righteous causes. You are just one person, and you're not a robot. You have to sort of take those sort of selfish moments to sort of look after yourself, because no one else will. No one else is going to look after you as well as you yourself will. So I absolutely agree. So
it's hard to do.
Absolutely. I'm still learning for sure. So here at UDS, particularly in times like this, we like to advocate positivity. And one of the ways I like doing that is through inspirational quotes. One of my favorites is, "I can't believe I ate the whole thing," because it works with anything in life, anything at all. You just keep reminding yourself there. Eventually you'll eat the whole thing. But with that in mind, what would be your inspirational quote to share with the world?
An inspirational quote to share with the world. That's a great question. I'm going to have to paraphrase, because I've not got a great mind for exact, unless it's right in front of me. But I think a good thing. I think a good thing to remember. So this is something my grandmother said. I never really knew my grandmother on my dad's side very well. She was she died when I was about 5 years old. But she was a remarkable woman. So she's from rural Ohio, a small town in rural Ohio, and she taught English classes to the Amish community, which the Amish community were required when she was a teacher to go to school up until 7th grade. And so she taught 7th grade English. And then beyond that, they were not like federally required to do so. And so a lot of them would drop out and kind of go to work, within the Amish community, on farms or wherever. So she would she would go meet with the families and say, like, education is really important. You can continue doing what you're doing, and, you have my support, whichever you choose. But, if you want to continue beyond 7th grade, I'm here for you. And so she was an amazing woman, and a lot of great quotes that she has, that my dad has told me that she said before. But the one thing that has always stuck with me is So she made my dad go to church when he was a kid, right? And one day the pastor or the priest or whatever, he's saying something. They were teaching Sunday school, and he was a kid, and something didn't add up in his head. And so my dad was like, well, hold on. Like, what about this? And so basically they got into some kind of argument. My dad said he didn't expect an argument. He was just asking a question. The guy kicked him out of Sunday school, and he went home. And my grandmother told him this. She said, look, I'm not sending you to Sunday school because I want you to believe in what they're teaching. In fact, I encourage you to come up with whatever your own beliefs are as you grow older. And I think that in fact, I'm proud of you for questioning that, man, because nobody has answers to these questions. Nobody has answers to the nature of the world, of what all this is. But she said, the reason I'm sending you to Sunday school, so you go to church, is because I think all religions teach the same thing. And all non-religions teach the same thing. All good humans teach the same thing. And she said, I'm sending you to Sunday school because it's one place to learn this lesson. And you're going to learn it in lots of other places too. And the lesson is, be good to other people. Be kind to other people. Don't kill other people, don't hurt other people, and just try to be a decent person who helps people who have less than you. And she said, that's the lesson I want you to take away from the church that you're getting these Sunday school lessons from. And you can get that same lesson from a synagogue. You can get that same lesson from a mosque. You can get that same lesson from a Christian church. You don't even need to get it from a church. You can get it from a book. She was a very well-read woman, and she was, so she basically said all this, and she said, people are by their nature good. And if we remember that and we try to find the good in each other, then we'll begin seeing the good in each other. And I think that that's a really important thing to remember right now, when we can just hate each other so easily. You know what I mean? It's just such an era of rage and hatred for people that maybe they disagree with us on something, or maybe they're just on polar opposite spectrum politically from us, or even like on things that we consider basic human rights. Maybe they're on a different spectrum than us. But, if we try to remember that, at their core, everyone's trying to come at it from the same place, which is, you don't hurt other people, you don't kill other people, and you treat each other decently. I think we all have a lot more in common than we realize, regardless of our religions or our political beliefs. And, it's the powers that be that exploit those things and try to divide us. But humans have way more in common than we have not in common. And so it's not a very succinct quote, but no, I felt like it required some kind of background.
Absolutely. I mean, she sounds like an incredible woman. I wish we had someone like her in our political seats of power than what we do at the moment.
Tell me about it.
I think everything would be a lot better if that was the case. But no, thank you for sharing that. That was very, very touching, honestly. Yeah. So none of us can plan for the rest of the year at the moment with the way the world is, both sort of pandemic-wise and socially-wise. Just absolutely everything is in a state of flux. But as the best you can, what does the rest of 2020 have in store for you?
Tom, I have no idea. I hope not more of the same of what's been happening.
Well, yeah.
I mean, so 2020. I mean, God, what a year it's been.
It's gonna go down in history for sure. For all the wrong reasons.
Oh, for all the wrong reasons. I mean, there's a few things I know for certain that I've got coming up. I shouldn't even say that. There's nothing's for certain anymore in today's world.
Yeah.
But so the things that I know I've got going, I've got a new semester of classes. I teach, like I said, I'm a teacher, and because of the pandemic, all of our classes have gone online, and so now I'm teaching online. I didn't want to be an online teacher, but now I am, and so we're making do and we're figuring it out, and so I'm going to be. That's one thing I guess I'm going to be doing for the rest of the year, hopefully, as long as my job still exists, as long as the funding for teachers doesn't get cut, which it usually does during times of crisis. So knock on wood, if I still have a job, I'm going to be teaching. Beyond that, I hope I'm involved in whatever kind of fights for justice there are in the world that I'm able to be a part of. I'm going to keep making music. I regardless of what's going on in the world, it's how I stay sane. I try to make a song every night. I don't always succeed, but I always sit down in front of the piano or the guitar or whatever and try to make a song. And so I'll keep writing songs and music and, gardening and building rickety things and petting my cats.
Very important things to do.
Yeah. And outside of that, as far as creative projects go, I'm working on a children's book right now. Me and my partner, it's going to be kind of like a musical children's book that we've been working on. So that'll probably be the next creative project that comes out after Anxiety Cat. That's what's going on with me. How about you?
Me? Same. Hopefully going back to some sort of job whenever this all clears. Other than that, just trying to work on this and trying to chat to as many people around the world with interesting stories to tell, because that's sort of the way I stay sane is just sort of sharing and just getting to know people, because it does make you realize that it doesn't matter how far the distance is. It's like you said, people are, as sort of a base level, really decent people. And I've chatted to so many people since this is the lockdown and everything, because obviously everyone's got a lot more free time. And I've not met anyone across all different mediums, whether it be music, films, video games, all sorts of creative outlets. I've not met anyone who wasn't an absolute delight. And that's sort of one of the most life-affirming things, is that sort of it's so easy to get misanthropic and sort of paint everyone sort of as the same brush in that everyone is awful. But once you actually get to speak to people, whether they are right wing, left wing, they do have sort of that core of decency, and it is sort of through communication that things are going to get better. And I sound super pretentious right now, but it's weird how
it's not pretentious. That's a beautiful thought. Yeah, no, that's a beautiful thought. I think you're right. We all got more in common than we realize. Yeah. And I think talking to each other is the only way to figure that out. So, keep doing it. It's a service if you keep doing it. And keep talking with interesting people of all different political persuasions. I think that's a very important job right now.
Absolutely. And so from one of the more sort of profound thoughts of this show to one of the more asinine, we are Upside Down Shark. And so with that in mind, Rob Taxpayer, what is your favorite shark? Whether it be from movies or real life or anything like that, what would be your favorite shark?
Not least favorite shark, but favorite shark.
That's what I meant
to come
to say.
Up with a few least favorite sharks, but I think. All right, I'm gonna go with both of them. I'm gonna say my least favorite shark and one of my favorite sharks for its resiliency is the bull shark. So the bull shark is one of the main sharks that we have where I live. We live right on the Gulf of Mexico, where all the hurricanes happen. We got another one coming our way right now, and bull sharks. It's a breeding ground for bull sharks right where we're at, and they give birth to their babies in Lake Pontchartrain, which is the lake that's just to the north of New Orleans that leads out into the Gulf of Mexico. And they're a very vicious shark. In fact, I've read some statistics that they bite the most people of any shark around the world. They're the most aggressive species of shark. In fact, before I worked for the community college, I taught in elementary school, and I had a first grader who actually got bit by a bull shark when he's swimming in Lake Pontchartrain. His family went for a swim, and something bit his leg, and he came back out, and they're like, "Oh my God, look at that bite mark!" And they brought him to the local university, and the local university shark scientist, I don't know what the name for that is off the top of my head, said, "That's a bull shark bite. He got bit by a bull shark. He's lucky to be alive." And and so they're very aggressive. But the interesting thing about them is how resilient they are. So their environment has been destroyed from climate change and from like here where they live. One of the places they live, at least in the Gulf of Mexico, there's oil platforms everywhere. There's just oil drillings everywhere. And we've had oil spills and just all kinds of stuff that have just destroyed the habitats of lots of things, including bull sharks. And so what they've done is they've just grown more resilient and they've adapted to it. And so now they can live in freshwater, which is terrifying for the rest of us. Yeah. But they've swum up the Mississippi River as far north as Minnesota, which is all the way up our country. It's like I'm at the bottom of the Mississippi River, which is at the bottom of our country in Louisiana. And if you follow the Mississippi River all the way north to the very top of it, that's Minnesota, is where the headwaters of the Mississippi are. They found bull sharks in recent years that have swum that far up to give birth, because the salt water is not doing it for them because there's so much destruction in the salt water. And so there's some theories that maybe they're trying to adapt to freshwater more so that they can survive.
I mean,
so they're resilient little buggers, and they're also aggressive little buggers. And so they're my most loved and favorite and most hated shark.
Well, there you go. I mean, sharks have been around since before the dinosaurs, so I'll be damn sure if they're here after us as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, I had no idea about that. That's amazing. But that is the last question I have. So all I've got left to ask is, where can people find you online?
Oh, I got a website. It's called hairpond.org. It's hair as in hair, and pond as in a body of water. Hairpond.org. It's not a real org. It's not a real org. I realized after I already created the website and I put on some records that my friend Nicole, who helped me make that website, she was like, Rob, you should reserve that for like nonprofits and stuff like that. I know that you can make a .org. I was like, really? I had no idea. I thought anyone could just, the .com was taken. The .com was, hairpond.com was already like some Italian hair website. And so I was like, make it a .org. But by the time I got it, it was already on a bunch of records. And I was like, I'll just have to clarify. It's not a nonprofit. It's just my website. Yeah. So hairpond.org, Anxiety Cat stuff is there. And it's also on Bandcamp, which is anxietycat.bandcamp.com. And a lot of the videos that are going to be going along with the Anxiety Cat, right? Once the protests and stuff, if they ever die down, I'm going to share some more videos from the Anxiety Cat record, which I think are an important component of the record, help kind of make sense of some of the things, especially the things that need subtitles if you don't speak the language of some of the audio excerpts. And those are going to be on, I have a YouTube channel. It's just Rob Taxpayer. I think you can search for that on YouTube. Yeah, so that's where the stuff's at. The Taxpayer stuff is pretty easy to find as well, Bandcamp. So, yeah, I guess that's where it all lives.
Perfect. I mean, Rob, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I'm not just saying this has been one of my favorite interviews that I've had a pleasure of doing. So thank you so much.
Oh, man, and Tom, likewise, it's really nice to have a chat outside of my immediate world, because right now everything feels so hyper localized that I got a bit of cabin fever over here right now, and things are the pressure's amping up, and so it's been really nice to chat with you as well. Thank you, man.
Well, the pleasure is
hopefully I'll get to come visit at some point, or you can come visit over here once things die down.
I would absolutely love that. And if you're watching this at home, make sure to pick up The End of Reality as We Know It. We'll put a link in the description to everything that you need to know. Hit subscribe for more creative. I'm going to do that line again. Hit subscribe for more interviews with creative folk like Chris Farron and other awesome people from around the world. And we will catch you next time.
Just a quick message: if anybody out there would like to be involved with the ongoing protests against police brutality in the United States of America, there's a lot of ways that they can get involved. And the first place that I think they could look is where all this started is in Minnesota. And if they look up MinnesotaFreedomFund.org, they are taking donations, and they have links to lots of other places that you can donate to be involved with it. And then, beyond that, the Innocence Project here in the United States is a project that works to free wrongfully incarcerated people of color in the United States of America, which we have very high incarceration rate. So check out the Innocence Project and support it if you can. George Floyd would have undoubtedly, if he had survived, been incarcerated after what happened wrongfully. And so people like the Innocence Project would have fought for his release. So donate to the Innocence Project. And if you want to donate to something that is local to where I'm at, ISLA, ISLA, it's ISLA Immigration, islaimmigration.org. And they are a 2-person pro bono legal team that works to get undocumented immigrants and refugees out of detention centers in Louisiana pro bono, out of their own pocket. And so we have concentration camps in America for refugees and for immigrants. And in those concentration camps, they're not required to have legal representation. ISLA does that out of their own pocket. And so $100 donation to ISLA would make a huge difference. And so if anyone's out there and looking for a way to get involved in righting some of the wrongs in America, that would be a good place to start. The Innocence Project, the Minnesota Freedom Fund. Get out there, get involved. Don't let the overwhelming nature of reality, as we know it, bring you down. Stay involved. We can make a difference with all this stuff. So thanks for letting me say that message, Tom. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We will put a link to all of that in the description below so you can easily find it there as well.
الذي بيته من الزجاج لا يرجم الناس بالحجارة. من أنتم؟ دقت ساعة العمل، دقت ساعة الزحف، دقت ساعة الانتصار. لا رجوع.